I want to talk Trey Hendrickson. Mike Phillips back with us. If you ever want to check out Phillips' stuff, Phillips was America's radio guest for a lot of years, covering the Redskins football team, Commanders for Richmond Times-Dispatch. Now runs his own website down here in Richmond, the Richmonder. Great news and insight there. But he knows his football team inside and out. Obviously, Tobi and I. The Commanders' biggest need is edge rush. That's not a secret. There's a very unhappy dude who's had 17 and a half sacks each of the last 2 years. OTAs today in Cincinnati. And keep in mind, Burrow's obviously been paid. Now Jamar Chase has been paid as well as T. Higgins. And Trey Hendrickson's upset with his deal. He doesn't have any guaranteed money. He's paid below market rate. But he showed up. And here's what he said. He said a lot of things. If I sat here with 4 sacks, they'd want a pay cut and some money back. I'm not going to apologize for the rates being paid to defensive ends in the National Football League. Trey Hendrickson's pissed, but still showed up. But it almost seems like he showed up just to kind of dunk on everybody. He said his statements have been provoked, that they haven't been fair to him. He feels disappointed, and he explicitly said he will not play on his current deal. Philly, does Trey Hendrickson play in Cincinnati this fall?
My gut says yes. You've got to find a way to make this work because you're in the Joe Burrow Super Bowl window. He even last year, even in a disappointing season, he was so good. He was MVP level good last year. You remember the Monday night game, obviously him and Jaden dueling back to back. You've got a 10-cent defense there. You've got one guy on that defense who's an impact player. You've got to go, Sean McVay style, like mortgage against future caps, Tom Brady and Tampa style. Do what it takes, because if you don't give Joe Burrow a decent defense, he's going to start to get unhappy. The whole operation's unhappy. You got to do what it takes. That said, if I'm the Commanders, I'm making that call every day. I'm setting my iPhone alarm. 12 o'clock. All right, time to call Cincinnati. See if they want to make a deal. That is potentially a missing piece kind of thing for this defense. I think you and I agree.
Yeah, I do. And I think, Tobi, I'm curious if you think Hendrickson actually gets moved.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Phillips there that you kind of got to find a way to get that done if you're Cincinnati, even if it's, I know he's going to want a longer term deal, even if it's something where you have to pay him a little bit in a couple of years just to keep him there for a few more. I don't think he gets moved. I just think that he's too valuable to the Bengals, and you can't really preach that you're trying to win and move off of really the only defensive piece that you have that's had 17 and a half sacks the last 2 years. That's about as productive as you can get at the edge rusher position. But I think that now that the draft has passed, if you're Washington, I think you can look at this sort of trade. I know this has been something that's been discussed plenty in the offseason, but a lot of it was before the draft saying, hey, trade the first round pick, trade this and that. Well, now that you're past the draft, you're looking into the future. And the issue is you've already given up some picks for the Laramie Tunsil deal.
Yeah.
But I think this is something that you could explore where now you're looking even further down the line and you're not giving up Josh Connerly, which you got this year, right? Like you've already made the improvements that you're going to make this offseason to add one more edge rusher. I just can't do a one. But if you're looking at day 2 and day 3 picks over the next 2 years, I think that's something you have to consider.
So everybody's aware, next year's draft, as it's currently slated, they only have 5 picks again because of the Tunsil deal. Right now, they would have a first rounder, a third rounder, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. Fairly comparable to this past draft, although they had a fourth and not a fifth. I don't know. One thing that is valuable for Washington is that none of this happened at the draft. So the Bengals, like a draft pick a year from now has a lot less value than a draft pick that just happened. Like since he got to pick the guy they wanted in the moment, if there was a guy right there they wanted. I don't know what a trade looks like for Hendrickson. He's going into the last year of a deal. He wants a new contract. That complicates all that, right? And Washington doesn't have a second and probably doesn't want to give up a first. But then you wonder what, if any, maybe tradable assets they have, and what does Cincinnati care about the most is protecting Burrow, obviously. And I wonder, and this is total speculation, and I wouldn't expect it to happen, but just for the sake of the conversation, if you're the Bengals, and one thing that's really important before I even go down this road, people here, like Commanders fans, are going to operate like the Commanders are the only possible option. And so that's, we've got to figure out what Cincinnati wants because they'll get it done. Cincinnati going to talk to everybody. And that's if they even entertain the thought of moving this dude. And Detroit, who feels they're an edge rusher away, or Denver or the Chargers, like there's just a lot of teams out there, So I think it's naive to think that there's.
Well, and real quick, JP.
Yeah.
I don't know that he can be number one on your priority list when you still haven't signed that McLaurin extension, right? Like that. I think that's going to get done, but that might be number one on my priority list. And if we're still a couple, we're inching closer to training camp and this is still a possibility and you've already got the McLaurin, then maybe you can revisit this. But I think that's got to be priority number one right now.
That's a really good point. Now, you could walk and chew gum. You could do two things at once. And the McLaurin deal is a matter of, it's probably Newmark and the agent until they get really close to the final steps, and then Peter steps in. But like, that's just a matter of math. You know what I mean? Like the Terry McLaurin deal is just a matter of figuring out, basically, if I had to guess what Terry's camp is doing. Buddy's looking at this DK deal. Metcalf just got the actual extension part of this was roughly, there's a lot of fake numbers on there, but what really matters is 2 for about 62. I think that's what you're looking at for Terry.
But I mean, if you're going to make this trade, you're going to have to get a deal done with him. So
right.
Just finishing one negotiation before the other, essentially.
I hear you, but the trade is the far more difficult part.
Definitely.
Like the reality with high level players is it's easy to figure out the contracts once you're willing to spend the money, right? Like what Terry's going to cost. If DK Metcalf, who's a fair comp for him, just got $30 million a year, and the agent could say 4-year, $132 million contract extension. That's terrific. The reality is it's 2 for 60, period. Terry will probably get a little bit more because he's come up later in the deal. He'll probably get 2 for 64. So like you could do that math, and then the Hendrickson math isn't that difficult either. Like the reality with the contracts is willingness to pay. And if you want to nickel dime about incentives or whatever else, Hendrickson, it's not as cut and dry, but you're probably talking 35 mil. Hendrickson's not as good as Crosby, but Daniil Hunter just got 35 mil. Myles Garrett, I mean, his new deal's banana land. So to your point, Toby, yeah, you got to be able to figure out how to make the money work, but the compensation is the challenge because you don't have that many picks. I just wonder if you'd look at your own roster and
well, and I think that their biggest need is definitely edge rush. There's no question about that. But I think when they approached this offseason and they had opportunities to make some moves, they made some moves. They're not sexy. Dietrich Wise isn't sexy. Javon Kinlaw is not sexy. But I think if you ask DQ and Joe Witt which they would rather have, give me a good secondary and I can manufacture a pass rush, or give me a pass rush and a shoddy secondary and I'll have to come up with a way to cover these guys. I think you can see the route they went. They went for Lattimore. They drafted Amos. They have Sanders still. I think they believe that with a solid coverage unit that they can manufacture some pass rush. And so I think that's what they're going to try to do. And they live with the fact that maybe they don't have an A+ ace edge rusher type, but they think at least for this season, before maybe next year they draft one in the first round, they can find a way to manufacture some of that. And so I'll take the guys in the back end versus the guys on the front end.
Well, dude, I would also, to your point, I would always take front end over back end. Just you're better off generating the rush. But DQ got asked about that, about the edge, and like, oh, were you trying to just decide to stop the run? And he's like, man, we don't pick one or the other. We just pick the guys that are going to help us. Now, DQ is getting really good at speaking without saying anything, but I think I know what he meant in that capacity. I got one name that I could think that may be an intriguing trade piece. I am not at all suggesting this is a real thing or that this dude is available. But if you're Cincinnati, what can you think of a player that would be an intriguing trade piece?
Brandon Coleman?
Yeah. Yo, you drafted the kid to play left tackle. He does it for most of the year. At times was good, had some rough moments as a rookie left tackle. You got 3 years of team control. The measurables to play guard are really good. Great team first attitude. And dude, just look at like the positional situation. You traded for Tunsil, you draft Connerly, you're moving him inside, but you already paid a bunch of money to Cosme. For this immediate year, Allegretti and Wiley can battle it out. They like Trent Scott. Like, I don't know that moves the needle at all, but
no, but
maybe you don't have to talk about.
When you think about draft picks for them, trading for draft picks next year is fine and all dandy, but they're trying to win right now.
Right.
So they need at least somebody. So
a third rounder next year doesn't help Joe Burrow beat Baltimore this fall.
Exactly. So, I mean, if that has to be the case, I don't know that I would let Brandon Coleman be the holdup because, suddenly one of those guys, once Cosme returns, whether it's Allegretti, whether it's Wiley, whether it's Coleman, one of those guys is going to end up on the bench. So, in terms, they're kind of expendable, even though you want depth at that position. If you could get an edge rusher and you don't have to, because they don't have a second rounder next year, and you'd think that at least they need a second rounder. Are you looking into 2027 for that? I don't know that you are, but if you could throw in an asset and give up a third, I don't know. It's just so tough. This is where the volume of trades that they've made with all these draft picks is so difficult because maybe you want to go after a guy like this, but maybe you're kind of handcuffed from doing so just because you don't have enough picks to be able to continue to not throw them away, but to give them away to go get even very valuable assets like a Hendrickson.
Thank you to our friend Mike Phillips. He had to run. Always great to see Philly. Good conversation here. We'll see kind of what emerges now that Hendrickson's gone out publicly and kind of gone a little scorched earth. I imagine we'll start to hear some reports, get some information. Landini, let's try to book somebody from Cincy, our buddy Charlie, maybe for tomorrow. That Hendrickson thing is not going anywhere. Now, I did hear as early as the combine, definitely at the owners' meetings, that the Bengals' plan was, hey, man, you got a deal. Sorry.
Well, do you think if this is something that drags out and continues to go and maybe even goes into training camp and he's holding in, is this something where he could end up at a very reasonable in terms of trade compensation price? Or is this something where regardless, because this guy has had 35 sacks combined the last 2 years, even if this drags out, the value is still going to be very, very high?
NFL trade values are so funky. Who knows? 1 year left on a deal for a 30-year-old is never going to be that high.
Because if it's
I think it's more about if the Bengals are actually entertaining drafting him. Trading him. I mean, because I don't think they're close to that.
Because if it's something where you can continue to wait it out and eventually it goes for a 3 or a 4, then absolutely you have to be in on that. But I just don't know that I see that either.
I think since he plans on calling his bluff and seeing if he actually has the willingness to not play games or miss practices, miss preseason.
Yeah.
I think that's where it's